Good. Well, welcome everyone to this open group webinar, which today is I think I can call it a security case study being brought to us by Evolution Software on Sophos. Before I hand over to Tim O'Neill of Evolution to kick us off today, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping issues to keep the event moving forward smoothly. Firstly, with regards to questions, and of course we would encourage you to ask questions today. If you'd like to ask a question of either Tim or Gareth this afternoon, then the best way to do that is to write your question in the text QA facility. If you do write a question in there, I'm going to ask you to address it to all participants. That way everyone gets to see all the questions that have been submitted. And our intention is to try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of today's presentation. If you have a comment or you'd like to share a comment with a fellow attendee, then the best way to do that is in the chat facility. So the questions in the QA, comments in the chat, thank you. Now, if for any reason you have to leave early today, or if you experience any local technical difficulties, then this event is being fully recorded, and everyone who is registered today will get an email with the appropriate link where they can access that recording. So, Tim, if you're happy, can I ask you to start today's presentation?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone. So my name's Tim O'Neill, as Simon just said, so I'm with Evolution. I've got two guys eagerly on the line here from Sophos as well, Gareth Morgan and James Cope. So I'll leave them to introduce themselves. I'll just sort of set the scene a little bit at the start here, but the bulk of what's going to be presented today will be done by Gareth and James, so I certainly will try not to take too much of the time at the start, and I'll let the guys get on with the good stuff. So, Gareth, if you want to sort of jump to the next slide, that's fine. So, yep, just a quick one about Evolution. I'm sure most of you have heard of us. We've done a lot of these webinars before. We're a member of the Open Group, of course. I guess really the only thing I'd sort of draw people's attention to is down the bottom right there in blue. We have a tool called Abacus. It's both Archimate and TOGAF certified. It's one of the few tools that lets you obviously pick and choose whatever is appropriate for you out of those two approaches, and lots of other approaches. We support well over 100 different frameworks. But the open group ones are of course pretty popular. Next slide. So, cybersecurity. Obviously, I'm glad to see all of you turning up today to hear about it. Not surprisingly, Sophos have a pretty good opinion on it. They sort of practice what they preach, of course, and I'll leave them to sort of set that scene. But as a broad market, there's a really good survey. I don't know if you guys know about it. It's done by Harvey Nash in concert with KPMG. It's a survey of CIOs. They survey well over 3,500 CIOs every year. Those CIOs represent about 250 billion in IT budget, so it's a pretty large portion of the market that we're all in. They come from over 100 countries. So needless to say, you can see that to them cybersecurity is a pretty important thing. It's well over 50%. So more than half of the CIOs they surveyed rated as being important. And in general, one thing that's pretty encouraging is that the actual budget overall, that 250 billion we're talking about, that is for the first time increasing, or more than half of the CIOs are saying that their budgets are increasing. So that's pretty optimistic for our market, pretty positive that our market's growing. Our skills as enterprise architects are going to be more and more in demand. Indeed, most of the analyst bodies out there still rate EA as one of the key skills that every company needs to have. So we know that. And now, of course, cybersecurity is one of those, dare I say, tools you need to have in your toolkit to be able to make yourselves valuable to the CIOs and the like. Next slide, Gareth. Just a quick plug. We've got an ebook. So if you go to our resources section on our website, you can find that. It's a great little sort of summary of a pretty good set of strategies and sort of principles you could use. But of course, the guys here from Sophos will give you some pretty valuable, pragmatic guidance as well. And so, pretty much with that, I will hand to them. I know the next slide is really just how do you contact us, so that's fine. You can get my email address off Simon, or if you've got a note of it there. If you need to ask anything, of course, about Evolution, that's me. Gareth and James, of course, will have their contact details. And we'll be at the Open Group Conference in Amsterdam in November. So, of course, if you want to speak to any of us, come along to that event. We'll be there. Okay, thanks. Over to you guys.
Okay, thanks, Tim. My name's Gareth Morgan. I'm Director of Enterprise Architecture at Sophos, and with me is James.
Hi, I'm James Cope. I'm one of the enterprise architects at Sophos.
Yeah, obviously we're going to talk about 6 steps for tackling cybersecurity risks and threats. We're going to give you a bit of context about Sophos and about enterprise architecture here and how we got started. And hopefully this is not just a cybersecurity thing. This is how you can get enterprise architecture up and running in your organization, or you can continue to add value and, like Tim said, demonstrate that to your CIO, CEO that you are a worthwhile organization and you can help out with a lot of areas. We've got 6 steps here. We're then going to just summarize those and talk about our next steps. So I'll kick off with some context about Sophos. We're a next generation leader in cybersecurity, so that's endpoint, i.e. traditional antivirus, network and cloud security. We're a global company. We have over 100 million users worldwide, and predominantly we sell B2B through the channel, so through distributors and partners, and we have over 43,000 partners. Some of the challenges we face is growth, which is a good challenge, but we have a need to scale all our systems and our architecture. We've doubled in the last 5 years, and we've got about 4,000 employees around the globe, as you can see our major offices there. If you want any more information about Sophos or our products, you can go to our website, or you can contact us directly and we can put you in touch with people who can help you out. So, step 1, really, we started enterprise architecture at Sophos about two years ago. We were looking for something to get off the ground and demonstrate value early. And for Sophos, obviously that could be security or growth or profit or compliance. I think really you have to think about what's important for your company. For Sophos, and probably for every company, security is important. So we decided we wanted to do something around security, and I think there's a lot of natural affinity between enterprise architecture and security. We obviously have a big internal security team, but we have a knowledge of applications and the general architecture at Sophos that maybe they don't have. So we went to our CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and CIO, and proposed that, we've done a lot around infrastructure security, but how much have we done around sort of application security? And we could, survey our application landscape and kind of put assess our applications from a risk point of view and look at mitigations to put into those. As I say, the CISO just finished a big exercise on sort of infrastructure level security, so this played very well with them, and we got that high level backing, and with that backing came budget. So we wanted to use a tool. We have the usual kind of spreadsheets or Visios or wiki articles and things like that, but we very much wanted to choose a tool, and some of the reasons for that were, we wanted to hold our architecture as data. We saw the shortcomings of, holding things as Visio diagrams. If you change one thing in one place, you have to change 100 diagrams, kind of thing. And we also wanted to to realize some of the benefits below. We wanted a kind of company mind of, bigger than any one person, bigger than people leaving or coming and going in the organization, to maintain our architecture and our systems information in that. With that, then we could collaborate. So we very much wanted to open up the tool and have people, contribute to the tool, whether they're business people or solution architects or business analysts or whoever. And then with all that information, we wanted very much to then analyze the information. Because it's held as data rather than drawings, we could look at things, like simple things like how many applications we have, which is over 800, by the way, or how many applications we want to retire, what's the technical fit, what's the security risk of those applications, and that kind of thing. And then finally, we wanted to be as efficient as possible. We're only a small team. There's only 3 people in the enterprise architecture team here. So we don't have a lot of time or resources. So like I mentioned, we wanted to be efficient as possible. and a tool, you know, fitted that bill perfectly. So we chose Evolution Abacus. Other enterprise architecture tools are available. And then we started with building an application catalog. And I think the important thing is here is just start with what you have. You know, we had spreadsheets of applications lying around. We had diagrams. We had people's knowledge in the organization. And we put all those into a tool as components. And most of these tools are basically graph databases underneath. So they have the idea of nodes and connections. And the nodes or components, you know, the primary component we started with was application. We quickly extended to things like departments, so we could say which departments own these applications. And we quickly built connections between the applications, so we could say what applications interface with other ones and how they exchange data and things like that. But we got all that into a tool, and then, very importantly, we went out and validated that information. We were very conscious we didn't want to stay in a dark room, you know, architecting away. We wanted to get out and meet the business, and we actually had something that was interesting to them. We had a list of, you know, applications in their areas or whatever. So we validated that information with them, and with that validated, and I'll talk a bit about how we did that more later. We decided to classify our applications. You know, not all applications are equal. You know, a Salesforce or an SAP isn't the same as Notepad++ or whatever. So we decided to classify and focus on our key apps. And the other important thing is, so that built our picture of what we thought the business and all the applications were today. We instigated a vendor review process, and James will talk a bit about this later. But the idea here was that every vendor that Sophos engages, you know, every supplier, application, people, whatever, goes through this review process so we know about it. And that is kind of like shutting the front door to new applications so that nothing comes into the organization without us knowing about it. And you have to be careful with that. You have to make sure it's lightweight enough that, you know, simple vendors can pass straight through, whereas the more complicated or the riskier vendors get assessed properly. So that was another key thing that we put in place. So we built our application catalog. Here's an anonymized screenshot of our applications, but you can see different things. So on the left, you've got like a browser window to browse the different components and different ways of showing them. And on the right, in the main sort of spreadsheet view, you've got basically the applications, applications as rows, and the properties, the information about them as columns. So you can see you've got name and description. Where you've got hyperlink in blue, it joins to another component, which has different properties and things around that. So, for example, you know which department owns this application. We extended out into capabilities with the American Procedure Quality Model, APQC. So you can see what, broadly speaking, what this application does, who's responsible for it, and then you can see the type, how we classified them. We have enterprise applications, utilities, etc. And then we started to collect other properties around them, like scores. So generally, we score things in 0 to 100, with 100 being good. And first pass, we just put basically what we thought the score was, and then we iterated over time and improved that by working out, and James will talk a bit more about this, about calculating from various properties what your score is. So that's where we got to with the application catalog. So then we have the raw materials for the next steps, which James is going to speak through now.
All right, thanks, Gareth. So I guess step 2, really, from the 6 steps, is all about how we determine what our security risk. So as a cybersecurity company, our own security is of utmost importance. So it's one of the key things that we get measured on. Our customers only trust us because we keep them safe. Our organization, at a macro level, has a risk matrix that we use for recording and managing risk. So our first task really was to take that risk matrix and apply it to information technology here at Sophos. So how we view risk as a kind of department looking outwards to our application estate. What we wanted to do was create an actionable list so that we could identify the riskiest applications in our portfolio to ensure that we were focusing our efforts on securing the architecture that carries the most risk, the areas where we're more concerned. In doing that, we built a matrix of the things that we're concerned about from the point of view of the likelihood or probability of an attack, and then what the impact to Sophos would be if somebody was able to get in and a breach did happen. So you'll see on this slide the things that kind of tie us up in knots with regards to probability are heavily platform focused. So the higher up on this chart are the more risky. For example, we consider that on-premise applications carry more risk than SaaS. We're not in the business of building data centers and all of the work that goes with that. So we'd rather kind of offload that onto somebody whose job it is. We do get concerned about the skills and knowledge to support our application. So Sophos has been going for 30 years, so we've got lots of legacy applications as well as kind of current ones. So we want to make sure that we don't have any single points of failure, that we don't have any knowledge gaps in the applications that we're supporting. We wanted to make sure that we have multiple layers of authentication. We've got policy in place for this, so we do kind of have a preference for single sign-on, for multi-factor authentication, but we also do have exceptions, and there's rules for those exceptions. One of, I guess, our biggest concerns is the application available over the public web. So, are we exposing a front end that is open to attack? Some of them, for example, Sophos.com have to be. Others, obviously, we can protect behind our internal network. So this list is not an exhaustive list of all the dimensions of concerns from a risk point of view, but they give you a kind of flavour as to some of the properties that we collect about our applications and then apply a score to. Now, if we roll this forward to what if somebody did get in, what would they get? So what would the impact be? Again, we work from high to low, as Gareth said, 0 to 100. So we classify our data. So on a kind of business impact basis, so we have high business impact through to low business impact, where high business impact tends to be confidential data, things that we don't want to get out, information about our customers' network configurations, for example, which we do hold some information about. We're concerned about whether the app holds personally identifiable information, and if it does, is it personally identifiable information about people that work on Sophos, or is it about our customers? And then also the volume of data that's there. So we've got some apps that contain just a few user records, some apps that contain hundreds of thousands of records of personal information. So combining all of these things together, we're able to pull together some data that we need to go and capture that we turn into properties. So if I move the slide on, so the slide at the bottom shows again a kind of an anonymized view of some of those properties that we've collected, and we use a scoring algorithm behind that to assign value to some of these properties to then give us a score. So from Gareth's point, we've got an application catalog. We've added more properties to it that reflect the things that drive security probability and impact here. We collect that initial data, and our view is if we don't know, we score negatively. So unknowns carry unknown risk, and then go and dig a bit deeper. So our approach is to go for kind of breadth first, so that we understand the size of the elephant before we eat it, so to speak. We've then built and tested an algorithm that will continually then score that catalog. So Abacus gives the ability to create algorithms both in code and visually that utilize properties against the applications to create all kinds of scores. So things like complexity, like criticality. We use it in a number of areas, but in the context of this presentation, we're focused on calculating both security probability, security impact, and then an overall security rating that is derived from those two. That script is run regularly, so as we're improving our information, we're also improving the score, so we can constantly see which are our riskiest applications. What we then do is work with our application stakeholders to continue to refine and improve that data. We regularly reach out to our product teams, to our business stakeholders as well, And as we uncover new information, we're updating the properties in Abacus, and the algorithm will then continually keep updating that security score. So we're constantly moving the riskiest things to the top. Our security score for us is an important metric. We report out on it every month to our stakeholders, who I think in turn at least once a quarter report out to a wider audience, and that's just one way that EA is adding value here at Sophos. So now that we've got a sorted list of where all of our risk is, it's time to start to mitigate that risk. And here at Sophos, we've got a number of mitigation strategies. So this slide shows again a handful of them. Hopefully some of them you are familiar with. So one of them, dynamic application security testing, looks to detect conditions that are indicative of a security vulnerability in its running state. So it's effectively real-time checking for indicators of vulnerability in an application. So that's a piece of software that we can apply to an application, particularly a custom application, to check that there's no vulnerabilities at runtime. We also deploy web application firewalls as well as traditional hardware firewalls. So these employ a set of rules based on any HTTP-based conversation to weed out cross-site scripting or SQL injection attacks, and two of the biggest, most common vulnerabilities. WAFs are designed to protect the application and serve as hosting the application. So again, it's a good way to add an additional layer at the application layer. We also deploy runtime access security protection, RASP. So unlike a firewall which looks at the network environment, RASP looks at the software runtime and tries to detect and block attacks by taking information that's available from inside the running application. So it's intelligently monitoring the inputs and then blocks any suspicious activity, so it's effectively working from the inside out. And then a secure software development lifecycle. So this is often overlooked, but we want to make sure that the application is developed using a secure software development lifecycle, that there's automated testing, that the code repositories are secure, and they're not just publicly available, and that the correct access levels are in place for those secure code repositories as well. And then we also we offer a number of bug bounty programs, so we incentivize individuals to try and break into our applications, both our products and our the applications that support them, so the IT supported applications, through both the offering of financial rewards and kudos. We also do all levels of penetration testing. Again, hopefully this is something you're familiar with, but they're authorized simulated attacks on our applications and or our network to try and find vulnerabilities. So we're seeing them less referred to as penetration tests these days and more referred to as vulnerability assessments, because the most comprehensive involve a combination of both automated and manual attempts to try and breach through the application through known and potential vulnerabilities. One of the areas that we've focused a lot on with some of our more legacy products is to reduce the data that's in the scope of the application. Again, often overlooked, but we can de-risk the application by reducing the data that's in scope, both with regards to the amount of data that's there and the type of data that's there. So we typically see in applications coming towards the end of life that they've probably got years of history, even though the user base has been significantly reduced. So we're able to archive away a huge quantity of that data, either by removing it or just moving it behind a publicly accessible UI. So we're still waiting for audit, but chances of getting that volume of data are then significantly reduced. We can also change the type of data that's in there, so we might need to keep the data forwarded, but we don't need PII, for example, so we can anonymize or obfuscate that data as well. So what we've done is we've also added these as properties to our application portfolio. So and for each one, there's different variants of the type of testing that can be done, from a very high level one to a low level, or in some instances, whether it's even possible or not. And we've added that, so we've factored the impact of those mitigations into our scoring algorithm as well. So we've taken those properties, we've assigned a value to them, and then we've factored those values into our scoring algorithm. So as we're applying these mitigations, we're able to continually update our security score to not only what was the original risk and probability, but by implementing those mitigations, how are we starting to mitigate the risk? Of course, the only way to fully mitigate both the risk and the impact is to just turn it off. And it's an area that we're working in as well. So we want to try and rationalize our portfolio as much as possible to reduce our surface area for attack. Again, as I say, we're an organisation that's been going for the 30 odd years, so we've got a lot of legacy app and a lot of technical debt, and so where possible, as well as performing these mitigations, if we can just turn it off, that's what we're looking to do. And so all of this work then starts to inform our recommendations for our application portfolio. So which applications we should look to improve and also because the risk is high. So this heat map here is a common kind of artifact that we're presenting both upwards to our senior leadership and to the business directly. As to the recommendations that we have for our application portfolio, and those recommendations are driven by a whole number of different dimensions, but one of the biggest dimensions for us is the security dimension. So holding our architecture as data allows us to continually recalculate our risk profile. However, there are other practical interventions that we as a function utilise to continually govern and reduce our risk profile. So Gareth mentioned it earlier, we have a vendor review process, so both the business and IT are allowed to introduce new vendors into the organisation. Here is Sophos, but who's checking them out? So in our organisation, we've got some existing processes, and we've streamlined those into one. So it's a unified security, data protection, legal compliance and architecture vendor review process that EA are responsible for orchestrating. We review all vendors, so not just technology vendors, and based on kind of an initial triage questionnaire that consists of 6 questions, we rank them low, medium to high, to then determine the type of review that we're going to have to carry out with our vendor. The higher the risk, the more thorough the review. So not only does this help us govern the risk profile, but it also means that we as EA get a head start on what systems are coming into the enterprise. The reason that we review all vendors and not just discretely technology ones is that a lot of vendors inadvertently introduce some technology as part of their offering. So we've had examples of, say, for example, pension companies that on the face of it wouldn't go through vendor review, but they're going to introduce a portal where some of our data is stored, and so we want to know about it. As well as vendor review, we also carry out design reviews for both big and small projects. So we've got kind of different EA engagements based on the size of the project, but typically each architect will need to complete a design review with the enterprise architects to ratify and where possible improve that design. That is then usually presented to an open forum with all the other architects in the business for both their awareness, so they know what else is happening from a design point of view in the IT space, and again the opportunity to improve the design. So it's a collaborative process. During then the implementation, each epic will then be presented back to the same architect forum, and this is a level deeper than the original design review. We also kind of during implementation we'll carry out an implementation review, and this is kind of our opportunity to see how far the implementation has wavered from the original design. It's an important step for us because we find this does happen when projects are under pressure from scope changes or timescale constraints. And if any changes have been introduced that then potentially introduce new security risks, then they need to get flagged up to the steer code. So each of these interventions allow us to continue to update the architecture, so we can see how our ecosystems of applications are talking to each other, and we've got a living and breathing representation of the data that's flowing from application to application. For us, the best governance is the stick that you don't have to beat people with. So what I mean by that is that the method of governance is the path to follow. So we try to build in security by design, so that secure is a natural path that is followed. As I said at the beginning, security is a big concern for us, and this is one way that we're practically using EA to drive our roadmap. Gareth's now going to, I guess, talk a little bit more about how we use this information in a wider EA context, and particularly with regards to our interactions with the business.
Okay, thanks, James. So basically, just to recap a bit, we've gone through, we've scored our architecture, scored our applications, got our mitigations and everything like that. So what do we do with that? You know, often we need people to take action, and you know, to do that, we sort of build consensus with the business around that action, and that's what we mean by sort of road mapping, what our future plans are. We meet the business regularly, so every 6 months we go through all our architecture applications and capabilities with them and review them both from the point of view of are these accurate, but also are they current and things like that. We try and understand the business concerns first. We don't go steaming in there and saying you have to retire this, this and this because it's insecure. We understand their business concerns first, because often they might not be happy with that application or something for another reason. So we might have wasted a whole load of effort if they want to get rid of it anyway. And even if not, we can sort of then couch it in terms and look for quick wins or things where we're aligned and it'll be easier to push through, and we can work on the bits where we aren't aligned, and maybe that becomes like a longer term goal. One of the things we found very useful is to use strawman diagrams or charts or statistics to sort of correct and inform. And what we mean by that is we give you a diagram and we go in with no kind of ego and say, look, this is our view of the world. You tell us where we're wrong, you know. And quite often they'll start picking out things and saying, oh no, we retired that last month and we retired this and things like that, which is good. And it also shows that you've got them then, you know, that people kind of like pointing out when you're wrong in the nicest possible way. So we find that that level of interaction, you know, if we went in with a blank page, often it would be very painful, but if we've got something there and then we just shape it and correct it, it's a lot easier. We feed our security scores into our overall recommendations, so they fulfill part of technical fit. Obviously, there's other things around technical fit like scalability, or you know, sort of the whether it's software as a service or on-premise. And we have our architectural principles, which, you know, those feed into that as well. And then what we're really trying to do is kind of improve the spread of information. So often we go sideways first, so we go for the breadth before we start adding a lot of depth, because we've found that, you know, we can always go to a particular person and a particular department if we want to find the depth, but the importance is like no one has that one view of across the whole landscape, and that's where really we add value, I think. So given all that, we produce artifacts like this. You know, we go into the road mapping with this kind of view. So on the right, you've got like a department application view. This is what you own. Here are your applications. Often some of them are a surprise, especially to the high level VP and C level people. The colors are the recommendations. So we can see here, you know, green is invest, orange is improve, and red is retire or migrate. The colors that you can also put little other dots on here. We've just got the criticality modeled here. Some applications are on bigger platforms, so that's why you've got a kind of application and application. And we just work through that with them, and often we find this is the best way. People will give us information about dates and things, and we'll look at some Gantt chart type views in a moment, but in the actual meeting, this is the best way, and we just take notes on when people say they want to retire things. On the left is a more detailed view, so we use this for where we want to rank things and say, look, these are our most critical applications, or, you know, the ones with the highest operational risk. You can see security rating here as well. That feeds into tech fit, and then various other things. You know, operational risk is a calculated field, so that comes from, you know, how likely is it to break. So we build in all that information, and then that feeds into our recommendations, and we can very quickly say, you know, why this is important. You know, operationally, it's reasonably low risk. Technical fit is good. Security rating is, you know, low, so it's not a high risk, and that's why we want to invest in it. So we can very quickly, you know, when people say, well, why have you made that recommendation, we can refer to a whole list of, you know, properties and sub-properties to say, you know, that's how we arrived at this conclusion. We then look at communicating the roadmap. So typically we'll meet with the VP or their reports level, and then we might include the VP and the C-level person, so for marketing, sales, etc., in a more higher level communication session of what we've discovered. So we use heat maps. You can see here on the left, this is a kind of application heat map by department. And you can see, you know, invest, improve, or retire, migrate. On the right, this is a capability view. So here the colors are slightly different. The capabilities are, you know, broadly speaking, what Sophos does and what abilities it needs to do to run as a company. And then the colors are, you know, red here is transform. So in the next 3 years, we're looking to transform this capability. Orange is improve, and green is run as it is, more or less. For those, you know, who want the question when, normally we show these roadmaps with a 3-year timeline and say, you know, sometime in the next 3 years, this is what we're looking at. But then we produce Gantt views. So here you've got applications. If it's going to be migrated, you can see we've got a target application, which is another kind of connection. What the end of life date is, and, you know, a simple Gantt view of when this application is stopping or starting. And then we also produce reports. So for application managers, you know, they want to know what applications they've got, what they're not always in these meetings with the business, so they can see a view of, you know, how the business is thinking. And we distribute those automatically as well. We then move on to more, you know, sort of analysis of what we've found. We can produce charts like this. So here you've got technical fit against business fit. Technical fit, as I said, is a calculated property. Business fit is more like a net promoter score on the scale of 100. So roughly, how likely are you to recommend this application to a colleague or a friend? And, you know, if it's 8, 9, or 10, then that's pretty good. 9 or 10 especially. You know, 7 or 8 is neutral, and 6 and below is really their net detractors. So we plot those, and you can see here the different applications, and the size of the application here is cost. So this can tell us different things. Obviously, you know, it's useful for checking, have we got, in a very quick visual way, have we got the recommendations right? Most of the invests are on the top right. You can also see outliers like this big application here, which has a large cost. The business are not very happy with it. Maybe the cost is part of the reason, but we should go and investigate that. So that allows us to do that kind of analysis. We've done analysis of the capabilities. So, you know, what across the business, this is more kind of C-level, you know, what is the company thinking about transforming or changing? You can see nearly half the capabilities in the various departments over the next 3 years. Sophos wants to change those, so it's quite a high level of change. We try where possible to include statistics on how many people we've spoken to build these, you know, to get these, because obviously these are collected data and people's impressions, so it helps build our credibility as an organization. We look at differentiate and operate in capabilities, and if we've got an area where we just want to operate and the security score is particularly low, then that's an area where, you know, we may want to retire that application or move to something that's better. If it's a differentiate area, then for security, it may be worth taking that risk, and there may be some things, you know, like exposing a cloud platform that helps people manage their secure devices that are inherently risky, but we can put more mitigations in place. We produce things like technical fit, red, amber, greens, you know, how well we're doing, how well different departments are doing, to introduce maybe a healthy bit of competition across the departments and say which ones maybe need to pull their socks up a bit more. And then our basic idea, you know, and this is very much how we started. We started in applications and we landed there, and we looked, instead of going super in-depth in applications, to expand into business architecture, so capabilities, like we said. We show value in a particular area, like with this security scoring and mitigation recommendations, and having a way to measure the security of our applications and improve it over time. And then we expand into another area like data or infrastructure. So broadly speaking, that's how we get through our roadmaps. I'll just move on slide. So we've looked overall, I think, at the different steps we took in getting our enterprise architecture practice off the ground, with a practical example of, for us or for many companies, which is important for security. We would say, we're not stopping there. We've got some future things we're going to look at around technical debt and the overall cost of IT, including headcount and various systems. We're also looking at monitoring and alerting. How critical are the different systems? How likely are they to break? You saw operational risk in there, and what is our monitoring in there, and also application rationalization. We're also happy to meet up with people from different enterprise architecture practices. We have quite a few, quarterly meetings to go through and just swap notes. So those are our contact details if you want to get in touch. And with that, I think we'll open it up to questions, Simon.
Yes, that's great. Many thanks, Gareth. Many thanks, James. Very interesting insight into that security-based enterprise infrastructure project. Ongoing project, I'd suggest. Yes, we have a few questions, so I'm going to work my way through them from top to bottom if I can. First question from Ravi, asking, is there a certain formula you use to arrive at a score?
James,
Yeah, so the security one is an interesting one. So we work with our own security operations center to determine that. So it's not, I would say, I guess it's part of the Sophos secret sauce, but the things that I guess concern us, we've assigned value. Now, everything that we've got with regards to the properties that drive that value up and then the mitigations that drive it back down are factored based on kind of importance and as voted for by them, I guess. So it's not a standard out-of-the-box algorithm. I'd say we've shown you a kind of a snapshot of the properties that are involved in that, but it's something that EA has contributed to, but we are not the only part of Sophos that was involved in that. It's very much kind of driven by our security organisation.
Yeah, and we went through a few iterations of it, sense checking it with the CISO and his senior staff to make sure it was capturing all the various properties that they cared about and which they saw contributing to risky applications. So, and basically it's just, if you've got like high impact, that gets a 0.3, medium is 2, and low is 1, and then you add them all together and score it out of a percentage of the whole. So it's not that secret, I don't think, but the actual, I think what, for some organisations, the data breach, might be more important. For us, we have the added problems of securing applications and also securing other people's networks, so we have to factor that in as well. So I think it would need tweaking for your organisation.
That's right, yeah. And also, we try not to present false precision here. So, so when we're reporting back out to the business, we're not giving them explicit scores, but we're giving them an ordered list. So, so we don't want to get pulled into any arguments of why one is 62 and one is 61. Yeah. We just want to know that in order of priority, these are the riskiest, or these are the least riskiest, and we can defend it by the properties that obviously drive that calculation. But both us and the security organisation don't want to get pulled into a debate over the 0.1 of the value, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so I'll just add one quick thing there, which is a generic thing about algorithms in general, is that, yeah, exactly as Gareth and James explained, you take multiple factors, so you have as many as you want, you normalise them, so that's where, they talk about mapping them onto, let's say a 0 to 1 score, or you might cap something, so anything greater than 50 is the same, it doesn't matter. You might take log of things, you might take the square root of things, so you've got to normalise every factor, and then you've got to weight every factor. So that's where people often, exactly as James just said, one company might decide that one factor is more important than another, and that's all totally settable. You guys, we of course ship the product with various algorithms, but we don't know what the priorities are that different people want to use. We don't even know necessarily what factors people want to use. So it's a normalization activity and then a weighting activity, and then James gave the key phrase there, which you've all heard me say before, which is we don't want to give you the wrong answer to 5 decimal places. you've got to be very careful not to confuse, precision with accuracy. So that's, obviously algorithms 101 is just take some factors and normalize them and weight them, and then be transparent about that, so that you don't have to say it's a black box. It's perfectly transparent.
Yeah, and we find the effort is in getting the data. The scoring part is the easy part. It really is. Going through iterations to improve that scoring, that takes a little bit of time or whatever. But to get the data for these properties that drive that scoring is where the effort really is.
Okay, Tim, thank you very much. And talking about 5 decimal places, Tim, that gives me a very good link into this other question from Renate, asking, you've looked at showing value via various metrics, but not actually in pounds and dollars. Was that a conscious decision, or as Tim says, or more the caution of giving the wrong number to 5 decimal places?
It was a conscious decision. We wanted to start with something that was important to us, and really security is priceless to Sophos. So we didn't start with a traditional, application rationalization program, or we can save you $1 million, that kind of thing. We wanted to start with security because that was the most important thing to us as a company. I think, we are going to look at those areas, but I think there are also, it depends on your quality of data, but they're very difficult to score. The security was an easier area, especially given our expertise in that particular domain. But we weren't trying to dig through mounds of contracts to find out how much people actually pay for these things, and trying to work out, this person's got half a head, but hold on, he was on this project for half the year and the other half of the year he was on another thing. So I think it depends on the level of finance and maturity of the accounting information you have. But certainly for us, that would have been quite difficult. So we purposely didn't start off in dollars, and I think you did see some cost buckets there, but we tended to score things by cost bucket rather than to avoid that kind of false precision. So, extra small was below $25,000. I think small was $25,000 to $100,000 per year, and so on. So people still wanted to know about cost, but we didn't want to go down to the end decimal place.
Yeah, just a quick little question on that, and I don't want to, I see we've still got a bit of time, so hopefully we can get through the other questions. All the GDPR stuff that came in earlier, is that not something that, when you talk about the impact, right? I know you had PII as a highly weighted factor. Is that not something you could put a dollar value to? Because, under GDPR, there's fines, and all that kind of stuff. So, I just wonder if that was a dimension you guys looked at.
Not especially, no. I think even that's hard to put a fine on. We could look, I think it's 4% of your annual turnover. And obviously, I think BA got fined, was it 189 million?
Yeah.
Deal, allegedly, or whatever I'm supposed to say.
Yeah.
Well, I think, it's hard to put, so what about this individual field? How much will that cost if we breach an individual field? It's very hard, I think, to put dollar values on like that.
Yeah.
And, again, we've looked at tech debt measures as well, and that, just exactly how do you measure tech debt is quite difficult. You're right that a lot of the C-level think in terms of dollars or pounds or whatever, but, getting those values is quite difficult, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's how you kind of position the EA function within your organisation as well. Our role is primarily one of influence, so it would be very difficult to put our initiatives on the hook of every dollar initiative that was out there. When we've got a say, or we've got an opinion about something, but we're not responsible for the consequence of that. So this was an initiative where we could drive some action and some change. So it was easier for us to focus on that score and bring that risk profile down.
Yeah, which obviously you guys put at the start with your, you've got buy-in and sponsorship from the CISO. So that's, that doesn't matter. You don't need to necessarily put a dollar number to things anymore. I know that was one of the other questions, actually, Simon, that someone was asking, so you might want to jump to that one about how the kind of relationship with the CISO is.
Yeah, that's a good one. So the question is from Robert Miller. Robert asking, you mentioned there was a CISO-driven infrastructure security initiative do you tie your application scoring and views to the infrastructure controls in some way, since applications run on infrastructure?
Yes and no. You can see some of them, I think, was the hosting type. But we're heavily in favour of software as a service. That's one of our, cloud-based software as a service. For the, one of the benefits being that we don't have to run the infrastructure. We don't have to worry about securing it. That's someone else's job who does that for a living, and that's their reason for being. So someone like Amazon or Azure or whoever. So we very much, we did include some level of infrastructure in there, but basically we're looking at the application itself. Most applications, a lot of the breaches you see are through the front door, through the application, to the UI, through either, SQL injection attacks or some kind of things like that. You do get, obviously, infrastructure attacks as well, but that was included kind of in the score. So I suppose we did include some level of infrastructure in there, but we didn't tie it specifically. The infrastructure initiative was a lot around servers that, we have a big development organization. They like leaving servers around that no one knows what they are, no one knows what they do, that kind of thing. So we had a big clean up and tidy up to kind of just reduce our surface area. And the idea was then to apply some of the similar principles to applications.
And in that particular initiative, most of the risk was negligible in as much as the servers, so the types of infrastructure that we ended up doing work on and turning on wasn't production, so it wasn't necessarily customer facing. It just maybe wasn't patched to the end level. It was somebody's dev box or test box that, as Gareth said, was kind of left lying around. The bigger concern we had on the application front was, these have usually a front door. And as Gareth said, most of them were SaaS, the ones that are on-premise or managed, hosted. We do score lower, and we're able to pull it back to, any issues that the security team found on the underlying infrastructure. But the two projects don't mesh over particularly well.
Okay, thank you. Question from Nick. Do you use business process models to design security to protect the nodes?
Business process models.
Yeah, the way I interpreted that, Gareth and James, is I think it's kind of like solution architecture, but putting using a process model or some sort of logical model to design how you're going to actually protect something. So that we've got to make sure that we go through this approvals process before we add a record and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, in all our major projects we have a security review, as you'd be unsurprised to learn, and part of that is producing a threat model, which sounds a bit like it's basically around data flows. So we don't. It's more a data flow model, I would say, of what boundaries you're crossing, between browser, user and server, or which information is going from computer or system to system, and how that's secured, how it's encrypted at rest, all those kind of things. So we produce a threat model for them, and then we get that reviewed. The bigger the project, the earlier we get it reviewed, and we might get through a couple of reviews. And then we, like James said, we have an implementation review to see how it actually got implemented and check that's still secure. So we do have those processes built into our kind of project process. We also, as James said, we review ethics, but that's more on an exception level. So, all projects go through a security review, but ethics, we just look and see, is there something new, is there some particular security concern before we refer those to the security team.
Okay, great. Question from Miguel. In your application classification, what is the difference in meaning between invest and improve?
Yeah, so invest is basically keep this application, we're happy with it, broadly speaking. Improve means there's some kind of problem with it, or something we want to do to it which is going to result in a reasonable level of change. It's not as big as obviously migrating away from it or it's switching it off, retiring it, but it is reasonably big. So an example might be you know, SAP. Broadly speaking, we're happy with SAP for finance and inventory and things like that. But we're on ECC6, so we eventually need to move to S4 because ECC6 is going to be end of life. So we will, that kind of application will be orange because we want to improve it. You know, it may also be orange because we need to apply, in this case, some of the security mitigations to it. You know, and we need to put RASP in there if that's possible, or do data reduction or things like that. So we use orange, broadly speaking, to mean, you know, we're happy maybe with the platform or the basic application, but there's some way we've got to improve it.
Okay, thank you. Joseph, it says, please throw a little more light on the data reduction in the mitigation stage, and he says that's stage 3, and how Sophos is doing it.
Yeah, so the data reduction is a good point because, you know, it's one of the few things that actually reduces the impact of a breach rather than the risk. And what we try and do, there's several ways. You know, it may be that we've got a system that we needed to keep around for audit and we can only access it through a particular application. So what we're trying to do is archive that data off in a way that an auditor will be happy with and then turn the application off. So that's one way, that's the ultimate data reduction, is removing the data out to an archive in our data lake and then, you know, turning the application off. What we also do is remove things like, you know, the history. A lot of applications, you know, users or build up in there and all the information connected to them, or orders, or, you know, financial postings or whatever. And you can archive those off the frontline system, which may be exposed to the internet, etc., and would be more risky, into a interior sort of reporting only area. So you don't lose the data, but you take the data out of the live system, and maybe you only leave in the last 3 years, and take out 7 years of info and put it in the data lake. And then the third way is just a bit more point than that. So maybe, you know, removing things that, you know, as users maybe haven't logged in for so long, and even though technically they're still active users, we'll remove their information from the system because we know they're probably, you know, experience tells us when they're not going to log in again. If necessary, and then they do contact us, we'll put them back in and all their information, but there's that kind of error as well. So it's basically around removing information you don't need, you know, historically. Obviously, you need to be careful to make sure the application can still run and things like that, and that you've got an audit trail of what it was done and who did it and things like that.
We've got examples of customer-facing systems where the application is a bit more legacy and the customer base has now shrunk. So, you know, an application that was down to 5,000 users, but is now only 20 users because everybody else has migrated off to a different platform, but we're still holding 5,000 users worth of data. So we can remove all of that data because it's no longer required and take it out of the scope of the application. So then it's just focusing on that 20 users worth of data that's still in there, and a lot of it is counted as historical information that at the time was required for when the users did have access, but now they don't have access because they've moved to another product. We can't turn off the application because we've still got some existing customers, but we can certainly remove all of the data that's no longer required.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Which one? So Miguel's asking, did you build an organization model as the source to generate any required diagrams? I mean, he's suggesting maybe an Archimate model, for example.
No, in a short answer, but we did build a meta model in Abacus. We actually used the one that came with it and expanded it to be more mature for our needs. As you know, there's different levels, there's different maturity models that come with Abacus, and we pushed in, like I say, the capability model from the EQC, which we then linked to all the different applications and departments, so we know what capabilities departments do, and we know what the applications do as well. So we did do that, and that was relatively simple. It was harder to maybe explain to the business what capabilities were and what the modelling was about. But I think we've got over that hump now, and then the business see value in it as well.
I guess the thing I'd add is you had a department list. So you already had, like, the org structure, is for want of a better word, as a list anyway, so there was no point reinventing the wheel and trying to come up with some generic, whatever org structure. It was there, and it was obviously well understood. So and that's what you guys said at the start, is, start with what you have. Don't try to fit things into some theoretical model. If you've already got content, just reuse it.
And we made the decision to try and work with the tool rather than put in another framework, if you know what I mean. Even though I know it can do other frameworks, but we wanted to work and get to value quickly. And then we can expand into other frameworks if we need over time.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. We've now gone a little bit over our hour, but that's absolutely fine. So I think this would be a good time to bring today's session to a close. But before I do so, James, are there any final points you'd like to make before I close today's session?
No, just if anybody does want to get in touch to share notes or to ask for a bit more detail how we did it, then we're always happy to speak to people.
Tim?
Yeah, and we'll send around a copy of the slides to people as a PDF, and you're like a meeting recording as well, and you'll all get that. So that's fine. I think we've got people's contact details. Then we Simon?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll send the slides around to people, which will have obviously our contact details in there.
That is great. So I'd like to thank Tim, James and Gareth for their time today. Thank you all for joining us today, and hope you'll join us again for a future webinar session from the Open Group. So thank you everyone, and goodbye.
Cheers. Thanks everyone.
Thanks. Bye.